So welcome along, and today I am joined by Steph Hague, who is a bid writer by trade. So Steph, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into bid writing?
Hi, Paul. Nice to see you. So I came up through the route of being in having the technical expertise before I went into the bid writing and bid management. So I basically started my career in facilities management. So, you know, cleaning, catering, all the stuff that you do to look after buildings, the not seen and not heard kind of keeping businesses moving.
Yeah.
Was in operational roles, looking after teams, managing teams, etc., and the sort of client management piece. Did that for quite a few years and was always really kind of interested in what was going on behind the scenes around contractual agreements and stuff like that and how this had all been set up. Then I was fortunate enough to get a position in a company called Gardner and Theobald, which is a quantity surveyor primarily. They had a small FM consultancy division and they were looking for operators, people who understand or understood how things worked in reality. So they kind of did the back to front. They wanted to putting the practice into theory rather than the other way around. So did that for a couple of years. Then it was about 2009 and G&T took quite a significant hit during the recession as a QS business. It would, building stopped, all those other things. So it was getting a bit sticky and I just thought, I wonder what I can do now and, you know, what's out there. And I actually went to see a recruitment consultant just for a chat. And he said, well, you've done operations, you've done consultancy, but the third side of the triangle is the selling, the bidding. And I was like, I've never really considered that. But okay. And that was 12 years ago. And here I am now. So within that time, I've worked mostly in the FM world, in and around buildings and outside buildings. I'm in an outdoor maintenance company now. I did have about 3.5 years in a professional services firm, which was a really interesting experience because they have a much more, well, when you don't understand the subject matter so much, you have to get much sharper around the bid management and the curation side of it and bringing it all together and making sure that side of it works rather than just head down, I can do it myself. Much more stakeholder management, engagement, partners, that sort of dynamic. So that's brought me to where I am today.
So you are clearly the right person to speak to give people a little bit of guidance on bid writing, because I know that lots of listeners and people that are watching this are looking at their bid process in-house. And these are going to be sort of lawyers and accountants and other consultants primarily. So what do you want to cover in the next 20 minutes or so?
I think what's interesting is I've worked in, you know, various organizations of different size and scale with, you know, different core businesses, but there are 4 or 5 common themes that come across all of them. And unfortunately, they're all the things that the not to do's. And I think, and it's interesting that in every business I've worked in a role that I'm in a bidding role, these things happen. And it doesn't matter if it's a £5 million business or 300 million pound business, these are pitfalls that people fall into that I think if you could stop doing them, you will exponentially increase your win rate.
Okay, that sounds like good stuff. So what is the first key thing to avoid when you are doing bid writing?
So I think, in my opinion, it's backing the right horses. Bidding is a very labour and time and resource expensive activity. Once you've committed to a bid, you are by definition allocating people to do it, and by definition there's an opportunity cost for the stuff that you've chosen not to pursue. So if you're going to put that time and resource into it, senior people often, you've got to make sure you've got a chance of winning. And I think I've seen it in every business I've worked in that, you know, you've convinced yourself that, you know, you're the front runner and actually you're the donkey at the derby and you are never going to win it. And I've been in bid processes where that's realised quite late in the day, and somebody sits back and goes, actually, why are we pursuing this? You know, we've already invested all this. And then at that point, it's too embarrassing to pull out because you've committed all this time and effort. So to me, a really robust qualification process, a bid no bid process that asks really difficult questions, not many. I don't think you need to ask many, but it's, you know, do we know this client? Do they like us? Have we got a right to win this? Do we, if we're putting a bid in, are they going to look at this and think, yeah, these guys have got a right to win this? They're in the mix. and also there's other things to consider. How much time is it going to take versus how much revenues it's going to bring? And there's, you know, it's I've just seen it so many times. Everybody gets woo excited and the opportunity lines are all head down, and nobody's actually said, actually, should we be going for this? Not can we go for it, but should we go for it? And yeah, it's, as I say, in every organization I've worked in, that's been a common theme.
Do you think people allocate enough time to the bid process? Do they actually go into it when they say, let's go for it? Do they actually map out how many senior people it's going to take and how long it will take to do?
I don't think I think often the case, the people who are making the decision actually don't know how long it's going to take and how much effort is involved. And then the bid manager or bid writer is left with that awful hill to climb of bringing that together and getting that resource and that commitment, which again, if it's a poor decision, it's very hard to do it because you just don't get the commitment from people. So no, they don't understand, I think, a lot of the time. And you're often dealing with people who do this intermittently. You know, it's not their core role. And they might have a sales target or whatever. So they're just thinking, yep, this is a great opportunity, let's go. But there's a bigger picture around all of this.
So rule number one, don't pursue the wrong opportunity. Okay. What's the second mistake people make?
I think the next mistake people often make is assuming there is a robust client relationship or that they understand the client. I always say, if you're looking at the sales life cycle, bidding is at the end of the sales life cycle, not the beginning. If this is your first major engagement with the client, I'd have alarm bells ringing about that. If they only know about you because you've put your hat in the ring to tender it, I think, you know, that's not where you need to be. I think ideally you help them shape their tender or their RFP or whatever they want to call it, their ITT. You should be involved in that if you can. If not, at least you're engaging with them in the run up to the release. You've got to have a relationship in place, I think, if you've got a fighting chance of winning some of this stuff, because to write a really, really good tender response, you need to know the client. And ideally, you need to know it down to the quite granular level of who's evaluating it, who's the decision maker, who's the key influencer, you know, who's actually signing the purchase order on this, who has the decision to say it's you. And I think I've been involved in quite significant large scale bids in smart organizations where that's been got quite wrong. And you don't get it, and everybody's like, oh, well, we didn't actually have the right person in our camp all along. You know, so this is quite important stuff to understand. And as I say, this wouldn't matter if it took half an hour to throw a bid together, but I've worked on bids to take 2 months, 3 months. So if you're putting that amount of resource and energy and commitment and money into something, you need to know that you've got the right person on the other side of the table in your corner.
So how do you, because that's a really interesting thing to say, well, don't just do a bid because it's come up. You should therefore only go for bids where you have a pre-existing relationship. Well, that means you're saying that you only really want to respond to bids when you've had a dialogue with a prospect, not a client, but a good dialogue with a prospect, and you understand them well enough to be able to presumably use their language when you're writing the bid.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there is a distinction between the private sector and the public sector. Where I work currently, we have a mixed client base of private companies and the public sector. It's much harder to get those ins with the public sector and to develop those relationships. So we do often commit to a bid where we don't actually, there isn't really a client relationship, but we know we can win it on price or another factor. We've just got so many credentials in that space that, you know, it's 5 people are going to go for it. You've got a 20% chance it's going to take 5 days to do it. Let's go for it. We haven't got much else on. So there's always an exception. But when you're bidding for a private sector client, you know, and they're a higher value contracts often, I think if you've not had that dialogue, then they're judging you on words on a page, and there's only so much you can articulate and convey through words on a page. And if they have, to me, that's the validation piece. They've spoken to you, the words on the page are like, yep, they really have got us. Yep, they've got it. The price is nice. Let's speak to them. So it's validation as opposed to selling through words, which is, I consider myself quite a good bid writer, and it's still a challenge for me. And I mean, the reason why I like what I do, and probably why I still do it, is because you touch every part of the business. Because when you're bidding and tendering, you're normally drawing on all parts of the business to support you, and that can be the finance department in terms of what, you know, just the accounts and your turnover and your robustness around that. HR around staff numbers, attrition, and all sorts, and bidding has become much more demanding in terms of what clients are asking for. At the moment now, it's all about social value and sustainability and what you're doing for the community. So our role is very much going into the business and digging around and saying, what do we do here? If we don't do something here, we're going to start losing business. And you touch every part of the business, and I think you understand a business much more than a lot of people who are working in it, because you get that helicopter holistic view.
Brilliant. Okay, so rule number 2, always understand your client, and don't go and bid for somebody that you do not know, because your chances are going to be slim. Unless, as you say, you make an exception and you buy the contract effectively. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a choice you can make. If you just want to get scale, and you can do that.
Okay. So rule number 3.
Rule number 3, and again, this is a common challenge I've faced, is it's a lack of commitment from senior stakeholders. And what I mean by that is, in my role, I see, I'm a bid manager. I own the process, but I'm not. You need somebody very senior in most organisations to sit on the spiky chair and say, I'm going to make the difficult decisions. When you need a yes, no, or for me to make or a decision about something, you need a senior stakeholder. You need a sponsor, effectively. And once you get that sponsor and that senior commitment, you get the momentum behind the bid, and other people join in. Often, it's somebody in my position, we're demanding from people who can least afford it, often subject matter experts, or people who are fee earners, and they're like, well, why would I spend half the day helping you? I've got a fee earning target, So we're always kind of, the niggly pokey one saying, oh, I need this, I need that. So, but if you've got the senior sponsor there going, actually, guys, as a business, this is a strategic target, etc., please give them the support they need. It just opens the flow, and the process becomes much more fluid and natural. And again, it's down to ownership and accountability. It's as simple as that.
Okay, fantastic. So number 3, make sure you have commitment from everyone in the organisation at the right levels, or don't actually go for that bid, because it's going to be time consuming for everyone, and they've all got fee earning work to do. So, okay, so that's the top 3. What's number 4?
I'd say it links to number 3 in terms of having a senior. Did I say 3 was a senior? Yeah, you need a senior level person involved.
Just as you started, you went forward, and as you came back, I heard it. That's
really weird. Let's start that bit again. Then
start that one again, and we'll just see what happens. Okay, of course, I bloody well muted myself because of that dog. Anyway, cut that out. Cut. Yeah. Okay. So that's the top 3. Yeah. What's number 4?
4 kind of links to 3 in terms of ownership and accountability, and I think number 4 is about. I don't know what it is. Carry on, do it again, and I'll try and not move.
Maybe it is I don't know. It can't be a moving thing. If you're not touching the table, it can't. And it's very annoying not to touch the table, because it's great that you're so dynamic and you're moving around, which is brilliant. And that's what we want. I mean, that's absolutely marvelous. It's just, there is that noise. Okay. So that's the top. Let's try again. So that's just then. It happened then. What the? It can't be my end, can it? Can't be my end. It has to be coming through, because it's coming through on those speakers.
I'm not going to move.
Are you working through a laptop or a desktop?
Both. I've got a laptop in front of me and I'm plugged into a second screen. Shall I unplug my second screen and see?
It won't be, no, it won't be a second screen, because the second screen is only video, but the laptop, can you just put the laptop on a book or something a bit soft, or put it on a folded up piece of clothing or something soft?
Yeah. I've done that. How's that? Is that better?
Lovely. Lovely.
I wonder if it's been picking up my phone, getting emails, and my phone's buzzing.
It's not a ping. It's literally, I would imagine it sounds to me like this would to you.
Okay, right. Let's try again.
Let's try again. Okay. And I'm so glad we recorded all that. That'll just make my life easier. So that's the top three. What's number four?
4 is linked to number 3 in terms of having ownership and accountability. And I'd say it's poor process. There's a lot of moving parts when you bid. And what's quite hard about it is, especially on larger, more complex bids, is there's often a dialogue with the client that's running in the background, and they will issue updated information. So there's all the logistics and the mechanics of keeping everybody up to date, ensuring stuff like version control. Are people working on the right versions, reviewing the right versions, etc., etc. So you need a proper process that with an owner, a bid manager, or on a large bid you might have more, but ultimately you need one process owner who's responsible for all of that in terms of every aspect and all the work streams that you might have in terms of the bid writing content coming in, or the graphic design if you're going down that route, or the commercials. It's just having a structure and a process in place to make sure it's the rigor around what you're doing. And often what people get frustrated about when they're bidding is that lack of process creates chaos, and it creates I used to work for somebody who said, I don't do pizzas and dogfights at 2 a.m. because that is the plight of the bid manager at it's 11 p.m. submissions at 9, and everybody's tearing their hair out to get it over the line, and that's when mistakes happen, poor decisions are made. And a good bid manager works from the end backwards, so what you've got to get to, and a week before that we need to have that signed off by the board, a week before that, and you're working back. I mean, I work in a more fluid environment now. It's a smaller business, smaller team, so we tend to do that kind of instinctively. We know what we need to do when, but in a larger organisation where you don't have potentially the authority to submit £1 million bid without going through levels of governance, if you don't have a process, it's not going to happen, or the bid will suffer. And I think that's the main point with me, that why I think it's so important, is because I've seen so many instances where failing to follow a process creates such chaos that unraveling the chaos and getting to the point where you can actually submit is taking that valuable time to think, create, refine. And bidding is iterative. You look at a blank sheet of paper and you think, where do I start? And then you get the first draft, and from the first draft the creative juices start. No, that's not what we're going to say, that's not what we want to do. And you can only harness all of that if you've got a process in place and you know that you're on track. If you're just managing all the spinning plates around you, that's just going to get it out the door. But to do a proper bid, the process enables all of that great stuff to happen.
And how many times do you say it's an iterative process, how many times would you typically rewrite a bid or review the bid and have a series of versions as you go? Actually, we're going to change this, you might move the order. So sort of big structural changes and reviews by different people.
It depends. It's, as I say, on a more complex bid you might have there's all sorts of different bidding manuals and methodologies, but I'd say for anything that's of significance, I would be looking to have at least 3 reviews, and that would be first cut, which is often called a pink review, where you get everybody in a room and they look at the first cuts. Are we on the right track? Have we got the right messaging here? Or are we hitting the client's hot buttons? Are we on the, is that right? Then you'd go back and do another iteration, and you'd have maybe a dark pink review, which is like you're getting to sort of final version, and then following final version edit, you'd have a red review, and then often on something really important, you would even go one step further and have a black review, which is the black hat doomsday review of, is there anything here, we've really missed a trick, or we've not covered, or we're exposing ourselves to enormous risk. So, 2 or 3, and that's what takes the time. But it's amazing how long it takes to get to that final version where you think we've absolutely got it. You just can't do it first time round. It's I often look back at stuff I've written, I think, oh my God, but then 2 weeks later, it's night and day, and it's that iteration, that creation, that review, and you need heads in the room and different points of view. It's got to be collaborative.
And that is time consuming. It's time consuming. It comes back to your other point about involving the right stakeholders when you're actually writing the bid. So, okay, fantastic. The 5th and final one.
Well, this is probably more about me than anything, and my particular bugbear is that I've seen great bids, potentially very good propositions and proposals, suffer through very poor tender writing, effectively.
Right.
Because you can have all the great ideas, and you could be the front runner, and the one that it's yours to lose. But if you don't articulate it clearly in a way that the reader understands, and that is answering the question that they have asked, which is often overlooked, you're laying yourself wide open. And I think the difference between a good response and an excellent response is often just structure, headings, how you break it out, it's not rocket science, but it's astonishing if the difference between something where it's just words or vomit on a page, as I call it, where it's all the stuff is in there, but it's just literally just throw it at them. And then measured, structured, storytelling kind of response where you're taking the reader through on a journey. And I see my job is to make it as easy as possible for the person at the other end to go, yep, they've got it, tick. That's all you're trying to do. And each time you do that, subliminally, they're thinking, yeah, these guys get me. And by the end of it, they're not even reading. They just know you're on there. If you're making them go, hang on a minute, they've mentioned this over here, but in that question, it was a completely different reference. And actually, that's not consistent. It's not even about what you're saying. It's about how you've said it. And it's so easy to, as I say, to hand grenade a good bid by just poor construction, poor writing, poor structure. And a good bid manager is the one that will come in and go, no, it's this is not good enough. We need to rehash this, redo this. So, and to me, I mean, some people don't care anymore. I do. Grammar, spelling, consistency, get name. Anything you do says everything about you, doesn't it? And it's as I say, I think attention to detail, and it's very difficult in the thousands of words you're writing not to make a mistake. But I think there's some obvious clangers that you need to keep an eye out for, and again, that's where the review process comes in. One thing I learned in my professional services world was the 4 eyes rule. Nothing goes out the door until 4 eyes have been on it. And I try and do that now, even if it's a peer review. Please, can you just check this for me? And never don't find something in somebody else's work. That's just the nature of the beast. You don't see it when you've done it yourself. You just don't. Yeah.
Very, very wise words, born out of years of experience. And what's your current hit rate? Because, of course, I'm just interested in that. I'm sure other people are thinking it, because it's incredibly competitive at the moment, certainly with lots of people going out to tenders over the last year or so. What are successes like? Yeah, in the last financial year, we were running probably about 1 in 2 was a win. So every other bid was a win. That's on new business. Retentions, we were more or less on 100% actually. And retention bidding, trying to protect existing revenue, is one of the key parts of my role. It's my least favorite part of the role because there's additional pressure. And it's almost, you get that double-edged sword of that the client really knows you and you really know them, and it's often harder to be creative when you've got that legacy. But yeah, it is incredibly competitive. But in the team that I work in, our last financial year, bizarrely throughout COVID, we were enormously successful. And I do wonder if that's because part of the reason why is because the senior stakeholders that we struggled to pin down before are sitting at their laptops day in, day out, so we could just throw meetings in, get their inputs. We had far more engagement than we ordinarily would have had. Makes all the difference. Steph, that has been absolutely fantastic, really enlightening, a fabulous sort of 5 key things to look out for when you are bidding. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.